Hello and welcome to the IRE Productions channel. We're a small company of digital Latin music publishers and we create arrangements of popular Latin music hits and songs in PDF format, MIDI and backing tracks for educational purposes and for live performers. Along with that, we like to share a bit of our knowledge as far as Latin music goes, which is why we created this channel. Now, up to now, we've only done tutorials in Spanish. However, due to popular demand, we decided to start doing tutorials in English as well. So what we're going to look at today is the concept of clave and how that relates to the rest of the instruments, especially the piano. Now, we know that what is generally known is that the entire arrangement needs to be aligned with the clave for it to sound right. And obviously the piano is no exception. To give you a brief overview of what we're going to look at today is mainly three things: deciding or how to figure out whether a tune is in 2/3 clave or 3/2 clave. And don't worry about that. I'm going to explain to you what that really means in the next part. Second thing, we're going to look at the characteristics of piano tumbaos or montunos into 3 clave and 3/2 clave. And lastly, we're going to learn how to grab a montuno that's originally written for 2/3 clave and adapt it to 3/2 clave. Now, before I start with the actual tutorial, I would like to please remind you if you could subscribe and also click on the bell so that you can get notifications whenever we put out a new tutorial, because obviously that helps us grow the channel. So without further ado, here we go. First of all, we need to clarify what clave means, because clave can refer to the instrument, those two wooden sticks, but it can also refer to the pattern. Now, what we're interested in today is the pattern, not really the sticks, right? So the pattern, first of all, the thing about the clave pattern is that very rarely is it going to be played throughout the entire song. Sometimes, generally, only in certain section, but that doesn't mean that it's not present. It's just implied. So at all times, musicians need to understand and need to know which pattern we are in, or which pattern, is being used in this particular song. As far as types of clave, there's actually quite a few, but the ones that are relevant to the genres that we sort of cover in our work, salsa, timba, Latin jazz, are the son clave and the rumba clave. The pattern is a 2-bar pattern that gets repeated over and over throughout the song, and is composed of 1 bar in which there are 2 hits, and then another bar where there are 3 hits, right? This is where the concept of clave direction comes into play, because both patterns can either be played starting from the 2-hit bar or from the 3-hit bar. When we start from the 2-hit bar, we call that 2/3 clave. When we start from the 3/2, we call it 3/2 clave. Okay, so in the diagram that you can see in the screen, we have notated the son clave and the rumba clave in both 2/3 direction and 3/2 direction. So before we can actually define what it means to be in clave, right, or aligned with the clave, we need to clarify certain concepts. For the people that know this already, I'm sorry, I'm going to try and be quick. Clear. So in this diagram, we take the example of the 2/3 son clave. Okay. Now, in the first line, so at the line at the top, we have the hits of the clave. So starting from the 2 side. Underneath, we have the on beats, 1, 2, 3, and 4 in red. And underneath that, in blue, we have the off beats, or the also known as 1+ or 1 and, 2+ 2 and. Okay. Now, we can notice that on the 2 side of the clave, both 2 hits fall on the on beats. That means that the main defining characteristic of the 2 side of the clave is on beats, which means the entire arrangement, and including the piano, the emphasis of whatever is being played over the 2-bar 2 side of the clave needs to emphasize the on beats, not necessarily the 2 and the 3. but on beats, right? Because I mean, if everything had to outline and emphasize uniquely the clave, we get pretty boring, okay? Now, on the free side of the clave, and this is where sometimes it gets confusing. Now, the defining hit is the second one, because you can see that the second one falls on the 2 and. The reason it gets confusing is because the first hit is on the 1, and the third hit is on the 4. Both of them are on beats. So you're thinking, wait, I thought this guy just said that the free side of the clave, the 2 side of the clave is on beats. So surely this is one is the off beats. Well, you are right. That is the case. In fact, especially for the piano, the first beat is never played, is rarely ever played, okay? So even though, and the third beat, so the third hit, right, which falls on an on beat, yes, it's true, it falls on an on beat. Now, if we were to look at the other type of clave, the rumba one, now the only difference between the rumba clave and the son clave is precisely that third hit. That third hit in the rumba clave happens not on the 4, but on the 4 and. So if I was to use the example of the rumba clave, then it would either be even more offbeat. The free side would have even more of an offbeat type of feel. However, because of the presence of that second hit, which happens on the 2 and, then we define the free side of the clave as the offbeat side, which means all the instruments, including the piano, will need to be emphasizing the offbeats. Okay? Now, so being in line with the clave means over the 2 side, emphasis on the on beats, over the 3 sides, emphasis on the off beats. Now, the piano is especially good in terms of instrument choice to figure out the direction of the clave, simply because the piano, at least in salsa, is always playing pretty much. Sometimes you play montuno, tumbao, sometimes block chords or sort of like jazz style or whatever, but it's pretty much always playing. So you can, at any point during the arrangement, you can sort of figure out, okay, which clave are we in? Let's look at the piano. He's gonna be saying something for sure. So let's go for that, right? Because there's also to keep in mind that within a single song, the clave can also change, right? So it's important to be aware which direction the clave is at all times. Now we're going to be looking at tumbao from a famous tune called La Banda from Héctor Lavoe and Willy Colón. This pattern is in 2/3. You can see it here. And we're going to use this pattern. I'm going to play it first, and then we're going to discuss what makes this particularly 2/3. Okay? Right, so here I've notated the piano notation for the tumbao I've just played. Underneath the piano notation, we have the clave, which is 2/3, as mentioned before. On top, we have the melody that's been sung over in the actual recording. So let's look at the tumbao. The first accent is on the 1. Okay, so that is a strong indication in general that this is going to be the 2/3 side. Now, what's a bit more confusing is the second accent, because the second accent happens on the 4 and. So then you'd be like, wait, so you're telling me one accent, fair enough, on the on beat, and then the other one on an off beat. Yeah, indeed, I am saying that. But see, this accent, even though it's on the 2 side, okay, you should think of that, in this case, is a G flat. This G flat octave and G flat in the left hand, you should think of it as belonging to the 3 side of the clave, even though it's still on the 2, because it's coming in and it's carrying over into the 3 side, right? Because imagine that this G flat, instead of hitting on the 4 and, it hit on the 1. If it hit on the 1, then we have an accent on an on beat on the 1 in the 3 side of the clave, right? And despite the fact that the hit of the clave itself is on the 1, as I mentioned before, the piano montunos and tumbaos don't generally hit or emphasize the one. Okay, so whereas our next main accent is here on the two and, which is where the clave hits, right? And that is the main offbeat here. And then again, and that is the last accents. I mean, here we have a note being played on the forehand, right? And it's not tying over because we want to make sure that we hit the one on the following bar, which again starts again on the two side. And here we go. And the pattern is pretty much repeated, okay? So this is a very, very typical 2-3 piano tumbao or piano montuno, right? In as looking at the song altogether, if for example you didn't really want to, you still weren't sure, is this a 2-3 or 3-2? As well as looking at the piano, another thing we can do is look at the melody, because the melody, just like any other instruments, need to respect this clave law. Okay, so let's look. So, right, I'm no singer, yeah, so hold tight on this one. So this one goes Llegó la banda, right? So we have the llegó, right? The was it E flat, D flat, and the D flat, hitting on the 2 and the 3. Okay, which corresponds to the actual hits of the clave. Okay, then we have the la, right, which again hits on the 4, right? So everything here is on beat, like proper 2-3 clave style. Okay, and then we have banda. Aha, okay, right. So here for banda, we are actually hitting the first beat, okay, which is not very 3-2 clave like. But then again, the only other note that's being sang in that bar is on the 2 and, which is our defining offbeat here. Okay, so one note on the on offbeat, one note on beat, but the offbeat wins in a sense is more important. So then, okay, this is fair enough for 3-2 clave. Remember that there's levels to being in clave. Certain patterns will outline the clave or emphasize the clave a lot, some won't. Okay, but just because some patterns or in certain arrangements don't emphasize it to the max, it doesn't mean it's wrong. We are still in clave. Now, in the final part of this tutorial, we're going to be looking, as promised, at how to convert piano montuno or tumbao that's in 2-3 into a 3-2-1. Now, for this particular example, I created the montuno here. And we can see it's in 2-3. The chord progression is B flat, A7, A7, D minor, and B minor 7 flat 5. And then back again to B flat, okay? We can notice that it has the usual characteristics of a 2-3 tumbao, 2-3 clave tumbao, with the first accent on the 1 for the 2 side where it begins, right? And then the next accent just before the start of the 3 clave, okay? Or the 3 side of the clave. After that, again, an accent on the 2 and, again, typical of the 3 side of the clave, and then repeat, and then again, another accent on the following bar, 2 side of the clave here. Okay, so this is a typical 2-3 montuno. So imagine this situation, you have this progression, right? And you're figuring out all the patterns that you've learned and you're trying to apply it to this progression, okay? And then suddenly someone tells you, oh mate, sorry, I forgot to tell you, this tune we're doing it's in 2, it's not in 2-3, it's in 3-2. So you're like, whoa, okay, so right, so you came up with this idea you like, and now you gotta sort of adapt it to the news, the 3-2. So we need to adapt this to the 3-2. Before we adapt it to the 3-2, I'll briefly play for it so you can get a feel of it against the clave playing. All right, and now I've put up the notation for the same montuno, but this time adapted to 3/2 clave. Okay, since you've just finished listening to the 2/3 version, I'm going to play the 3/2 now, so because you have the other one fresh in your mind, and you can compare the feel and how it changes along with the clave playing in the background. Now let's take a look at the notation itself. So first of all, you can see that since we're beginning in 3/2 and on the free side of the clave, you can see that the first beat, there's nothing there, okay? So we actually begin to play the pattern on the offbeat, right? Always with the same progression, okay? We have an accent on the two and, the defining accent of the free side of the clave, right? And then again, we have sort of a little chromatic note, which is the G sharp, before we move on to the second bar, which is the two side of the clave, putting an accent on the one. The next accent falls on the three with G natural, okay? So again, we're in line with the clave, and then the final accent again is the one just before the start of the free side of the clave, at which point the whole thing pretty much repeats. Well, on the free side here again we have the two and, we have an accent on the two and then again at the beginning of the two side of the clave in the following bar. So this way, we have grabbed this montuno, we have grabbed our 2/3 montuno and turned it, adapted to the 3/2, maintaining the same progression, okay? Now, one thing to bear in mind, there's not a single right way of adapting a montuno from 2/3 to 3/2. There is obviously variations and things that you can do differently. So what you want to keep in mind, if you're aiming to adapt the montuno and have to create a 3/2, a montuno in 3/2 that, you know, emphasizes the clave a lot, then you're going to want to avoid excessive arpeggiation, because obviously that sort of makes the clave direction a bit unclear because you have notes everywhere, okay? I'm not saying using arpeggiation will make it wrong, but it depends on your objective. If you just want to be in clave and you sort of have an idea and you're not, you know, you just want to make sure you're not, you know, going against the clave, then you don't have to worry. And it all depends, sort of, it's just part of the decision, your decision as an arranger or as a pianist. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you'll join us for more in the future. And thank you very much for watching and listening.